Working under the motto of Research, Report, Engage, the State of the Rockies project aims to connect Colorado College to the greater Rockies region. So I'd like to introduce tonight's speakers. Bita Becker is a member of the Navajo Nation and is currently employed with the Navajo Nation Department of Justice, where she focuses on pursuing the nation's water rights. She is a graduate of the University of New Mexico School of Law and the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. While in law school, she was a founding member of the online UNM Tribal Law Journal. She is married to Paul Sprufa-Ann, and they have two children, Bahi and Tasba. So first, I'd like to welcome Bita Becker.
So, as Ben mentioned, I am a lawyer with the Navajo Nation Department of Justice, and of course I noticed a typo on the first slide. Can you not hear me? Is that better? And I was really excited about this invitation because I really enjoy speaking with undergraduate students. When Brendan contacted me about speaking tonight, the topic was a little bit more broad. It was broadly Native American perspective. And as I explained to him, I can't speak from a Native American perspective. I can speak from the Navajo Nation perspective, but not from the Native American perspective, because there are so many in the Colorado River Basin. The Red Tribes are what are called they're members of the Colorado River Basin Indian Tribes Partnership, also known as the 10 Tribes Partnership. We all hold reserved rights to the main stem Colorado River. Let me start with the population. It's expected that the 2010 census is going to report that there are 332,000 people who self-identify as Navajo in some level. This picture, the reason I'm throwing this up is, so in 1868, we signed a treaty with the United States, and that's that center gray square. One of the great things about the Navajo Nation is that, unlike many other Indian land bases, ours has continually expanded. And this, I think, is a reflection of the strength of the Navajo people, the strength of its culture, the strength of a people who choose to continue to exist. When there are lots of people historically over time who have said, well, we don't really want you to continue to exist, whether it be rounding up Navajos and moving them into what I just showed you, Bosque Redondo, our own form of Trail of Tears, or whether it's the 1950s policies of assimilating, of taking Indians off the reservation, putting them into major cities, Denver being one of them, and trying to get them to leave their tribal affiliations behind. That just isn't. One of the statistics I forgot to tell you about is in the poverty reporting, it's estimated that about 40% of the people who live on the reservation would haul water. And by haul water, we mean that cute little first or second grade picture in the center, right? Where this young boy's image of how you get clean, safe, reliable drinking water to your home is you put some tanks in the back of your truck and you drive somewhere, either to a local town, surrounding town, or maybe to a stock tank, that windmill up there, and you fill up your barrels and you take it home. Because of that source of supply, Navajos have the highest rate of waterborne illnesses of any Indian population in the United States. And I think what's interesting about tonight's talk is, we're the unheard voices, and Oswald's coming from the environmental perspective, and in some ways, people might see my presentation as, the opposite of that. It's increased water, it's increasing, it's taking water out of the San Juan River, piping it through the reservation, and this is socioeconomically the poorest area of the reservation. So whatever numbers I read to you earlier, they're worse here, and it doesn't supply water directly to people's homes. Distribution systems have to tie into these two pipelines to develop it. At $2011, it's costing approximately just shy of $1 billion to build. But I have to say, and we were talking to the Bureau of Reclamation, the people who are authorized to build it, about a month ago, and it is so exciting. And I'll probably tear up, because I always tear up when I talk about this. For mid-level Navajo Nation bureaucrats who just face barriers every single day, this is so exciting to us. we just feel like we're doing such good work. What could be better than bringing clean, safe drinking water to people who don't have it? So the theme there was, the positive impact that all the students in this room are going to have. But I think that one of the challenges that you all have, the undergraduates have, is as this world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, is seeing the human family, despite the borders, despite the differences in language and culture, that we all need access to water. And this sort of thing is what brings the human family together. So I think I've gone on long enough, and I'll let Oswald speak.
Oswald Nino Hosa is the Director of Water and Wetlands Program and the Associate Director of the Birds Program of Pro Natura Noreste, the northwest arm of Mexico's longest-standing environmental organization, and he is based in San Luis Rio Colorado, Sonora. He obtained a PhD specializing in wildlife ecology from the University of Arizona, and he has worked on research and conservation projects in northwestern Mexico since 1997, especially in riparian and wetland areas. And for our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Oswald Nino Hosa.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to talk here with you. It's a pleasure being here in Colorado Springs. And so I'm going to talk about the Colorado River Delta, so the last portion of the river. First, I just talk a little bit about Pro Natura. So Pro Natura is an environmental organization in Mexico. We work throughout the whole country. So we do conservation, environmental education, monitoring, and now more recently, water policy and binational relationships. Our goal is to protect nature, but always in harmony with the growth of society. So this is the Colorado River as it enters Mexico. This is the Mexicali Valley. It's a large agricultural area, about 400,000 acres. And this is the mouth of the river and the Gulf of California. So what was the Colorado River Delta 100 years ago before the construction of dams? Well, just the wetland area, talking about cottonwood, willow forest, mesquite, and marshes, was 400,000 hectares, almost 1 million acres. All of the water of the river flow into the Gulf of California. We're talking about 15 million acre-feet of water. So this influence extended 65 kilometers into the sea. So you can imagine this rich estuary where the river waters mix with the sea and created another 1 million acres of rich estuary area. And of course, there have been drastic changes in the delta. Well, of course, in the lower Colorado, but especially in the delta, there have been a drastic reduction of river flows, but also agricultural expansion has modified the land in the floodplain. So we have lost about 80% of wetland area in the Colorado River Delta. So it's very drastic, but one important thing to notice is that the loss has not been 100%. But you can see that during the 80s and also in the 90s, there were additional flows going into Mexico because there was very wet decades, there was a lot of snow, the reservoirs were full. So there were these flows getting into the wetlands in the delta, and actually that created a lot of natural revegetation. And that's what sparked interest in restoring the delta. We saw a response of nature just to having water going there. This other image just to show you the extent of wetlands in the delta in 1984 during a big flood event. And in 94 it was very dry. So you can see the difference in wetland area. Some pictures of what is remaining in the delta. And this has been natural revegetation just because flows have been rich in the area. This is the Cienega Santa Clara. We'll talk a little bit more about it a little bit later. And the Hardy River. The Hardy River is maintained mostly by agricultural drainage. And so this region and these wetlands, they still are about 120,000 acres. And they are one of the most important stopover sites in the migration of migratory water birds in the Pacific Flyway. There are about 300,000 shorebirds every winter in the delta, plus 40,000 to 60,000 ducks and geese. So they're still very valuable resource despite all the changes. And there are about 380 bird species, so it's a very diverse area for birds. It's amazing that with all the changes, we still have many bird species. And this is the Yuma clapper rail. It's an endangered marsh bird protected in Mexico and in the US. And 75% of the total population of this bird is in the Ciénega Santa Clara in Mexico. One of the surprises that when we started this program in the late 1990s is that there are a lot of birds in the riparian corridor. We thought, and it was considered in the literature as a dead ecosystem, and we found out that there are a lot of birds, very good riparian birds actually. But then we started our study in what we call like a wet period, when there were the releases in 1998, 99, 2000. But since then, the drought has hit the basin. And you can see here by 2004, the conditions in the reservoirs have declined. And also, there is this famous graph showing supply and demand. The blue line is the water use in the basin, and the purple one is the water supply. So finally, we got to the point in which there is more water use than water supply. What this means is that, or the impact of this on vegetation is a decrease in vegetation biomass or just vegetation density at 30% since then. Very drastic, very clear. But also a change in composition of species. We lost, just in this time period, 76% of our willows and 42% of our cottonwoods, and we had an increase of 17% of salt cedar. And in terms of birds, this is the summary of everything, no? The drought caused a drastic reduction of flows, which reduced the health of the riparian habitat or the quality. And we had a population decline of riparian-related birds. At the same time, we had a population increase of agricultural-related birds, or what are considered bad birds, no? Like your blackbirds or mourning doves, things like that. Another example is just getting wastewater treatment effluent. As I mentioned, no, we're also looking into that. And so we made an agreement with the state government of Baja California to help them with the creation of a wetland, artificial wetland for the restoration, or for the treatment of water. In exchange, they will provide 30% of the effluent as a permanent allocation for the Hardy River. So with that, it helped us reach the target for that wetland in particular. And so in addition, we had this wonderful 250-acre wetland that is treating the water and is creating habitat for wildlife too. And another part of the program is protection of key sites. It's just your standard conservation easement to protect key wetland areas. So we already have about 3,000 acres and pictures of working with the communities and protecting the sites from basically cattle overgrazing, but also land conversion. And the interesting part is that 90% of the water for the Ciénega is agricultural drainage that comes from the Welton and Mohawk valleys in Arizona through the bypass drain or moat canal. And it's a long story, but it's basically agricultural drainage that is too salty to put back in the river because it will affect crops. So they build a canal to dispose the water into the Gulf, but accidentally restore this wonderful wetland. The problem is that the water is being targeted to be used by the Yuma salting plant, so to be desalted and put for human consumption. But if the water is used completely in the Yuma salting plant, the Ciénega Santa Clara will disappear. So it's a very interesting binational issue. We have learned that binational cooperation is possible. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was impossible to talk about binational agreement for the protection or restoration of the Colorado River Delta, and now that's exactly what is happening. We have a very resilient ecosystem. We just need to add water. And we know that we don't need to be very afraid of disturbance. These delta systems were used to disturbance of a different sort, with pulse flows, flooding, sometimes drought, flows might go different place. So disturbance is not necessarily bad for this system. We can work with it and make it work for our benefit. This process of improving environmental health in the Delta is really helping to improve the livelihood of the local communities there. And that's it. Thank you very much.